what advice you have for young people to rise to the top?
I think the irony about what I'm going to say is that the best advice I can give is to be wary about the advice you receive. And I say that only because I know that I'm so conscious and so conscientious about listening to others, about valuing the perspectives of others, especially those who I have deemed to be successful, those I want to be like, those I want to learn from. And I listen to other people's advice so much that sometimes I have a really hard time distinguishing where my voice is and all of that. And so with the advice I give, I also say be skeptical of what I'm going to say. Because at the same time, any advice I'd give to young people, it's really the advice I'm trying to give myself now. And it's all specific to me and to my experience. And to remember that, and to be careful and not to be so arrogant, so full of hubris to think that you don't need anyone else's advice, but at the same time, to have some sense of core, some intrinsic sense of self and value and principles that are unchanging regardless of what that advice is. And for me, I think that's what the greatest advice I think I've ever come to, which is finding that balance between, as Rainer Maria Rilke would have said, living in the questions. That sometimes you can't have the answers and you can't have them when you want them. But you live in the questions, and in time, after time, you find that somehow the answers are just coming to you and you've had them all along. And you have to be able to live in that uncomfortable space. You have to be okay with not knowing. You have to be uncomfortable to sit in that discomfort, to stay awake to the pain of that discomfort, to not knowing, to not having all the answers. And that drives tremendous levels of innovation and curiosity and inquiry. At the same time, you can't end up paralyzed in that space either. Because in the day-to-day operations and actually doing something that's going to make a difference, that's going to transform the world for the better, that's going to lead to your own level of personal and professional success, you got to also make decisions. And you also have to be okay with sometimes applying answers that, even though they may not be perfect, and even though they may not be really fully developed, they're the best what you have. And then to the same extent, you got to forgive yourself. Because this lifetime nowadays, for some of us, with the opportunities we have, with the privileges, it's a constant effort of needing to manage the dissatisfaction of the choice not taken. Every choice we make, there's an opportunity, and that opportunity is so filled with blessing. But if we don't manage it right, it can be the curse. And so somewhere along the way, that same insatiable drive that pushes us to be better, to get better, to constantly be perfecting ourselves and to striving to make ourselves better, we also have to learn ways to turn that off, to forgive ourselves, to care for ourselves, and to allow ourselves to sustain ourselves through this process of always trying to get better, to love ourselves throughout the way. And then finally, I think to that point, as you grow, and this is something I struggle with every day, I can be calculated in it. I know how to perform it sometimes. But what I want to get better at is not being so afraid. Not being so afraid of other people's judgments, not being so afraid of people's perspectives on who I am or who I'm not, on what I'm doing or what I'm not doing. So much of my life, Russell, has been driven by fear. And I think fear is good. Fear in a lot of ways, it wills us forward, it keeps us moving. It's this tremendously delicious evolutionary skill we have. But for so much of my life, I've been paralyzed by it. I've been so afraid of failure that I think it's really kept me from taking the risks and really putting myself out there and finding and insisting upon a better life, not just for myself, but for the people around me and for the world over. So I think once we face our fears and once we, face those fears in a forward and in a confident way, then that's where true possibility and true success emerges.